There's a movement brewing, and that movement is the MeTotal lifestyle.
It centers around you keeping your sense of self intact and in gaining clarity of purpose as you age. I'm Kary.
I'm Joe.
I'm JM.
And we're on a mission to show you how to enjoy friends, fellowship, and life without substance dependence.
It's time to discover how you can begin living a MeTotal lifestyle.
Right here on the FUZZEE'ish podcast. Let's go.
Welcome back to the FUZZEE'ish podcast. I'm your host, Joey Q. And with me today, as always, are JMG and Kary. Boys, how you doing?
Doing good, man.
Yeah, man. Doing well. It's good to see you all. It's been a minute.
Right? It's been a minute since we've been all together. For sure. Lots going on in life.
Happy February. Happy 2024. I know we've done a couple of interviews in the new year, but this is our first fellas edition of the new year. So big chance for us to catch up and just see what's going on in each other's lives and talk a little bit about the industry and kind of current events and where we see this podcast going. So it's been a little while since we got the three fellows, the three co-hosts together with no guests. So just wanted to kind of, do a little round robin here and see what's going on in each other's lives. I guess I'll kick us off. On my side of the fence, there's been some weird stuff going on, weird stuff, negative stuff, heavy stuff. My family, not necessarily me or in my direct family, but in my kind of extended family, we've been dealing with some mental health issues, bouts of, homelessness, stuff like that. I've had a cousin die recently of a fentanyl overdose, which obviously is not great. So, I can't help but to think that this message that we're trying to get out there in MeTotal is more relevant now than it ever has been before. Because, seeing some of these things happen, it just reminds me of how there's not really a lot of places in society for people with like hardcore mental health issues to go. Whether it is kind of being on the brink of homelessness and not necessarily having all of your bridges intact with your family member and friends, or whether it is battling, hardcore addiction. It just seems like these are the forgotten people in society, and it's a very heavy topic for me right now.
Yeah.
But I just, I thank God for my own unwavering commitment to MeTotal and living a clean lifestyle. So, that's some of the things I've got going on. Obviously, the business is going well. I think I've been consolidating some of my practice. So instead of working on a lot of different clients, I've been trying to do fewer clients and commit more of my time to them. Life as an entrepreneur is an upside down, topsy-turvy endeavor. But I think I'm learning a lot, and I'm trying to put those things into practice. But that's just what's going on in my life. I'm thankful that my immediate family, everything is going well there. Truman's 6 months old now. So, I think he was born 1 month before we launched this podcast, and now he's a growing dude. He's getting big. He's still not sleeping all the way through the night. It's causing me some problems there, but family life is pretty good.
Where's Steve Buckhands? Dagger!
It is waking up at 2:45 this morning. When my wife was like, I've been up all night with him. Can you get up? I was like, oh, crap.
That's
I'm
booty, man.
Be up with him
I do not miss that part
all morning.
At all.
Yeah. It's, it's the life I chose, so I can't complain too much, right?
Yeah. 3 is it,
How about you
man.
guys? Kary, what's going on in your life?
Yeah, man. Again, condolences to just you and your family. It sucks to lose people, man, especially when it's someone who's close to you, who you know, like who you grew up with. So, yeah, man, just my prayers and condolences to your family. Yeah, man, definitely been a season for me as well. I feel like for me, what's been on my heart lately has just been this whole concept of resilience, and something we talk about a lot, when it comes to this whole MeTotal movement. And, I put together a video the other day. It's like, when things are going good, your wife is, happy with you, and your kids are cooperating, and your health and fitness are in shape. Money's coming in, like it's easy to feel good. You know what I mean? Like life is good. It's easy just to sort of whistle and skip. But I think the true test really comes when that dark cloud comes in and you forgot to bring your umbrella and you're like 5 miles away from home, but you got to get home. I think that's where the rubber meets the road. And for me, personally, I think I've just really been looking at myself in the lens, or from the lens of resilience, and just really, instead of beating myself up, really sort of trying to give myself a little bit more credit, because I think it's easy to forget how far we have come on our journeys versus where we're not. And I think for me, just really stacking on top of just some of my own challenges in life, I just realized, like, bro, like, yeah, this is the part of the story that sucks. Like, this is the part of the story that, you know, you probably don't want to repeat again. But if you're looking at it on a screen, like, this is actually the part that is the most interesting. Like, this is the part that makes all the other stuff that happens that much more, you know, worthwhile. So I think for me in general, just sort of being in the eye of a storm right now, just remembering to just kind of take a step back. Like, yes, I'm in it, but I don't have to completely just get wrapped up in it. Like, you know, whoever out there is getting this message now, it's like, just because you're losing doesn't mean you're a loser. You know what I'm saying? And just because, you know, you got a setback right now, doesn't mean that you're going to be stuck in this sort of limbo. So for me, just lately, I've just been thinking a lot about just my own journey, how far I've come, just some of the incredible connections I've made. You know, obviously you guys being part of that, but also just reminding myself that there are legitimately people out in the world who don't feel like they have anyone to go to, you know, and that right there is just something that I hope ultimately this community can help to bridge that gap, because we do want people to feel like they have support, and knowing that when they are at those lower points in their life, you're actually kind of exactly where you need to be, as long as you can just keep your eye on the prize. So yeah, fellas, I didn't mean to come up on here on my Tony Robbins, but
no,
yeah,
I
man,
love
just
that,
really
man.
trying to lift myself out of the darkness right now with a clear head. So,
you know, it's interesting, man. Like, and I appreciate the vulnerability, Kary, in what you're sharing. I appreciate the even additional depth that we've connected on one-on-one, particular to those challenges. And, you know, the thing that I've been really trying to take a step back and recognize personally is what's interesting is it doesn't matter how well life seems to be going on the surface or materially, or how poorly it's going on the surface or materially. The reality is, as you're working towards whatever is the next level, whatever is the next chapter, whatever is the next blessing, whatever is the next, you know, profession or occupation or success story or whatever that is, or you know, 10 more pounds of lost weight, etc. It's having to show up every day, right? And not seeing the result immediately. And that's so hard. And I, you know, I've been putting that into different flavors for my own self, specific to different people that I've been talking to that are having financial challenge, right? So you're working hard on a daily basis, but you don't see the fruit of your labor right away. You have to be thinking about that in the long term, and that's really hard. Or you look at somebody who's overweight and they're showing up to the gym every single day, and they're getting on the scale and they're seeing not a lot of improvement. But the reality is, to get to the place that they want to get to, they got to keep showing up. And it's the same in work, right? Like, you know, when I think about my life professionally and even personally to some degree, there's lots of things that I want to work towards in this next chapter that I look at myself in the mirror on a daily basis and think, well, I showed up today, but I'm not really seeing the outcome or the results, and I'm not seeing the progress on the things that I really want to see progress on. And that's hard. That's hard for all of us. And that's hard in life. And that's the way life is. And I've seen a bunch of like bullshit, you know, because we talk about this stuff all the time, because I'm interested in it, because I share stuff with my wife and with you guys and friends that's motivational. I get all the motivational stuff on my Instagram feed is just filled with all these people that are sending out, basically reusing motivational quotes from other people over and over. But one that keeps coming up, and I think is just so clear, is you're living the life that you dreamed of 10 years ago. And I think most people can look at things that have progressed in their life, and there's certainly setbacks. But Kary, you wanted a wife, you wanted a family, here you are, right? JM, you started a business, you wanted it to be successful, you wanted it, that happened. But we never are, and I think this is human nature, we're never satisfied, or at least most of us aren't satisfied. You're always looking at the next thing. And as you make each rung, you want to keep going, and understanding that it's the sum of all the parts is the thing that I keep coming back to. And just lastly, I know I've talked, but like on the MeTotal side, and particularly Joe, just like, you know, condolences on your friend or on your cousin with fentanyl. You know, I think we could probably have a long dialogue with, maybe have different people drop in and talk to us. But fentanyl is an epidemic, and it doesn't get nearly the coverage that it should. I mean, the number of people that are dying on a daily basis, not even realizing that they're consuming fentanyl, is terrifying, right? There is so much of this happening all over the place, and the way that at least that I am able all of a sudden to measure it is, it's only it's every few days I hear about somebody else that's like one deviation away from me in my circle that's had either a loved one or a friend or a cousin or, you know, even a spouse that's passed from this. A child, you know, somebody professionally, their kid, 17 years old, came home from basketball practice, went into their bathroom to take a shower. Dad went to bed, brother went to bed, woke up the next morning. He wasn't in his room. Door to the bathroom still locked. His little brother, 13 years old, found him dead on the floor with a half pill still on the counter. Literally died immediately from a fentanyl-laced pain pill that he had. That's everywhere. That is so terrifying for me as a dad, right? Like thinking about, if this is how it is in 2024, my oldest is only 10 years old. What is it going to be like when he's 16 in 2030 if we don't get a hold of this? How many more times is our boy that all of us know, Jason Marshall, right? Good friend of ours growing up, has been like, you know, salt of the earth in a fabric of Reston for as long as we've been around, right? Like basically our entire lives. He has a thing on Facebook where he posts these pictures of people that die. Like RIP, you will never be forgotten. And my goodness, man, like that feed has been live the last 6 months. You know, the number of people that are directly connected to our childhood that have lost their life, and in some cases have taken their life, but in a lot of cases have lost their life to fentanyl because they don't have hope. And I think, Kary, what you said about having people to talk to and having some hope of you know, being able to ultimately get out of the hole that you're in, that's what I want to provide as part of this narrative and this story. And I know MeTotal started with drinking, and it's certainly still the sort of origin of all of it. But at the end of the day, what we want to do is inspire people that there is a better life that you can live. And it truly starts with taking one day, one better day at a time. And while you might not see the result right away, if you keep at it, all of us are models of the fact that the good things are to come. And even through challenge, you can find success and find all of these blessings. So, yeah, it's a lot of deep shit out there these days, you guys. And it's,
and I would say, you know, one word that popped out to me, JM, while you were talking about that is, you know, or not word, but like one kind of way of thinking about it is like, what do you determine to be a long time or a short amount of time, right? So, you know, an example is my whole life I've battled with my weight, right? Back when I was 21, I went from like almost 300 pounds to down to 175 pounds within about a year, roughly. Of course, it's been like 25 years since that happened, and I gained a bunch of weight going out to LA and then coming to here to Tennessee. Eventually got up to like 260, 265. But over the past 6 or 7 months, I've actually lost about 30 pounds. So I'm back down, and it's actually the least amount of working out I've done in the past 20 years.
How much of the how much of the jazzercising have you been doing as part of your
actually, I haven't really been doing a lot of that lately, but I know what you mean. That's actually,
I mean, because you're I gotta tell you, the frame of
chiseled,
that face,
man.
Yeah, the frame of that face is you might have to like be the next.
I thought you had a filter on, man.
Look, he says he's not really doing it, but it just happens to be in
just
his
right
pocket.
there.
Yeah, it's like in his pocket. I haven't been doing it. He like started to chomp on his tongue thinking about it. Then he's got it in his pocket.
But in
all his best friend right there.
Yeah, it's been about 7 months, and I'm down 30 pounds from just really fasting and doing like different types of supplements.
Nice work, man.
And stuff like that.
Yeah, congrats, man. That's amazing.
But when I think about that, you know, is 7 months a long time or is it a short amount of time? Right. And the grant,
Right.
I talk about it all the time with my wife, you know, because our newborn baby's 6 months old, and it feels like it happened like that. Right. And now
Time to have another one.
every
What's up,
day when
Leanne? Let's go.
knowing me and Leanne, yeah. But every day when I step on the scale, you know, I don't see that much progress. But it's thinking about it in that macro level. When I look back and I'm like, okay, well, 30 pounds in 7 months. If I do that same thing for another 7 months, that's 60 pounds in 14 months. That's a massive amount of weight loss in a relatively short amount of time, you know. And if I thought going into it, hey, this is going to be a process, it's going to take about a year and I'm going to lose 60 pounds, I'd be like, no problem. That's no time at all, right? But I think we as humans sometimes we're in a microwave society and we want to see stuff happen overnight. But it's really just that, you know, slowing things down, looking at things in a macro, doing the same things repetitively over and over again to create the habit is really, you know, that's you created the habit, you know, in most cases, you know, when you're gaining weight, you created the habit by doing what you shouldn't be doing over a long period of time.
Totally.
So you might as well reverse that habit and try to do what you should be doing over a long period of time.
I've heard something recently, and this just hit so close for me about you've got to get to a point where when you don't do what you're supposed to be doing or want to be doing, that it just pains you, right? So if you don't go to the gym that day, or if you eat something that you shouldn't, or if you're not chasing the business or the concept that you have, or it eats at you, right? That is so true, right? Like you're not able to get to the place you need to until it's truly something that burns you if you're not doing whatever that is. And that's hard. It doesn't happen overnight, and maybe it's the 66 days that Mike talks about, or creating a habit, Joe, like you're saying. But I can tell you, if I don't move my body for 20 minutes every day, like I'm trying to close the move ring on my watch every day this year. And if I don't do something by, you know, middle of the afternoon to have moved towards that happening, it starts to burn my ass, and I figure out how I'm going to do it. And the reality is you can make time for whatever it is that you need to make time for. Like anybody that tells you they can't is full of shit. There's a business partner of mine right now. It's like, oh, I can't make time for this. And I'm like, you can make time. It just needs to be a priority. Mm-hmm. And so that it's a prioritization exercise, not whether you have time or not. So
Kary, you said something earlier about taking inventory and taking kind of giving yourself a little bit of credit for what's going on and how much you've evolved and stuff like that. How much is, you know, because I think unless you're measuring yourself, you know, and JM, you mentioned closing your rings and stuff like that. That's something that I've avoided at periods of time when I'm not living my best life. But how much is kind of going back in during some of your tough times and taking inventory or auditing what you've got going on and kind of, you know, looking at the good and the bad truthfully, how much has that helped you kind of, you know, keep your spirits high in the most recent weeks?
Yeah, immensely, man. I mean, I definitely get amnesia from time to time when, you know, certain scoreboards don't appear to be having points added to them. You know, I think in our society, you know, especially as someone who identifies as a male, who is a male, you know, our finances just play a big part in like, if you're winning or not. It's a very easy thing to add up, like what is in your bank account. And I think for me, sometimes I over index on that because, you know, JM, you mentioned something earlier. It's like, you know, I wasn't the kind of guy that's like, I'm getting married like as soon as I turn 21. I've never been that guy. But I've always told myself that like when I do get married, like I only plan to get married once. Like this isn't something where I'm like, oh, okay, my fifth wife. And, you know, and no shade to anyone who's been married 5 times. Cause hey, you got to keep going, you know, but I just feel for me, the relationship that I have right now, just with me and my wife and our kid, it's like, I mean, what we've been through in the last 6 months, I mean, there are people who've been divorced for less challenging things for less challenging things, you know? So for her and I to be able to hold space for one another and grow and have this level of maturity that's allowing us to really level up and really support each other through this has been incredible. You know, I couldn't imagine going through this with a partner that wasn't supportive, you know, and it's that stern support. You know, I heard something the other day. It's like, just because it's good for you doesn't mean that that's necessarily what you need to go for. Like cake is good. You know what I'm saying? Like you can eat a piece of cake every day and say, man, this cake is good. But over time, like that cake, can really have a negative impact. And for me,
I
I
do
just
love
feel
you
like
like a
I've
fat
just,
boy loves cake, by the way. I do love
yeah, I
cake,
mean,
though.
that's real talk, man. I love a
Yeah,
good piece of cake.
that's a
But
good
just
line.
to close the loop, man, I just feel like as I reflect and I look at my habits and I look at some of the relationships that I've built, it's like, okay, maybe the way to measure this isn't something that's going to pay this bill. But ultimately, the foundation that we're creating is going to allow us to do so much more. It's like there's so many people that have, you know, the financial success or the house or whatever it is, but there's no love in the house. There's no trust in the house. They never have time with their friends and family. They're extremely, you know, outside of their fitness goals. And for me, like my fitness is really good. You know what I mean? My relationship with my wife is good, all things considered, going through this. And I feel like I do have some really good friendships and just tight um, connections with folks who I can talk to and just be vulnerable and share. So I think again, looking at life, especially here in the Western world, it's really easy to look at that scoreboard. But I mean, you and I, you know, we all know that there are people who've been very successful have whose family members have had to read suicide notes. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? So it's like at the end of the day, it's like, what are you measuring, Kary? You know, and how far have you come? Because yeah, I just don't feel like I would really be able to appreciate some of these other things that might not be in place if the foundation of where I've come from wasn't as strong as it is now, you
Mm.
know? And I think just before, man, I mean, just as much as I used to drink and smoke and just have sort of these transactional relationships, like really just closing that loop in my life and just really bringing in more quality has just really made a difference.
Man, I thank you. Um, one of the questions I had was just sort of the relationship aspect of everything that's going on. So it makes me so happy to hear that you have that force, and you know it's so important to have people that are going to not always tell you what you want to hear either, good and bad. Um, but that last mention of how much closer your relationships are removing smoking and drinking or whatever other kind of toxin related aspects of consumption. I mean, and this is coming from a guy who's been married since 2012, right? So
Wow, man.
12 years now, 12 plus years. And dude, most of I would say the majority of those years didn't feel as good as you're saying the relationship with Tanya is right now, right? Like it's super exciting in the beginning. You have a kid, you start chasing your jobs. I'm drinking too much. You're separate all the time with travel. You're finding output to other things that isn't. And the reality is, this last almost 1,000 days without drinking, my
Yeah, man.
relationship with Erica is at a different level and it's at an all-time high. And that's because there's nothing in between it, right? Like the directiveness of our relationship and our connection and in the understanding of our partnership with regards to our job, which is our family, is at an all-time high without anything diluting or diverting that connection. And I think the thing that I keep coming back to with lots of people, even at work, is like life is a big relationship. And the less distractions you have between those connections and the truer or the stronger that you can feel those relationships and the pulses, both positive and negative, to ensure the best connectedness is going to be the most successful life personally and professionally, period. And the cool thing about what we're doing is that all starts with yourself, man. Period. Like you can't make the decision to walk away from booze. You can't make the decision to live a more sober life. You can't make the decision to be more connected with your wife if you don't like who you're seeing in the mirror. And so finding that path and finding a place to feel that strength and that conviction towards being the best version of yourself is where the rest of all that stuff comes from. And as I said, like I'm stacking it on a daily basis and I don't see the results every day, but I can look at the last 1,000 days and say, I wouldn't have the relationship I have with my wife. I wouldn't be doing this with you guys. I wouldn't have sold the business that we sold in the last 2 years. Like there's just a laundry list of things that all started with this idea of maybe I should put the bottle down for a little bit and see what happens. It was never like, it's just such a problem I need to stop, right? I was lucky. But man, just the impact has been
It's so
just,
funny because it's like I think
Yeah,
one of the
man.
things that we
Thanks for
keep
sharing.
dancing around, or we keep kind of like, kind of getting circling around, I should say, is there's two kind of really forces at play when you really think about our evolution as men and people and whatnot. There's the need to kind of evaluate and be tough on ourselves, ask ourselves the tough questions, but then also the need on the back end to not go too far with that, but to also forgive yourself for what you've done, because you can't really heal until you just acknowledge what it is and
You
you
got
try
to
to
feel it
figure
to
out
heal it.
support, right? So like there's this weird friction of like I want to be tough on myself but not too tough because I also need to come through this thing and I need to get better. And
Unless you're David Goggins.
well, I think some people are just too tough on themselves and they never get over that because they're too tough with themselves. They don't forgive themselves. They don't, heal their generational trauma or whatever it is that's holding them back. And then there's some people that aren't hard on themselves at all. They keep doing all these things to self-sabotage. So it's kind of like figuring out that balance is really important.
I mean, I think the thing that I was talking about that I'm really challenged by right now, especially given a lot of the things that we've already talked about, is just this world that we live in, right? Like,
Yeah. So like
it's really hard for me at the moment to put blinders on just society, culture, and really global conflict. And my kid,
fentanyl, mass shootings, all the things that
yeah, so it's like
ravage
but
us.
it's right, it's not just domestically, it's globally, right? So you have
War.
so right, so like I have an almost 10-year-old boy who goes to his public elementary school with a bunch of people that come from different backgrounds and have different faith profiles and have parents that are sharing different amounts and depths of what is going on in the world with regards to the various conflicts, and maybe have some connection to something like a drug overdose, or that they share more depth and more clearly than maybe Eric and I choose to. And then on top of it, you have these different things that are happening at public school. I think all schools really, with regards to these drills that they do in the case of somebody coming into the school with a weapon or what have you. And you just find yourself in these conversations that are way deeper than I could have ever imagined having a conversation with a 9-year-old. And then you have a 6-year-old who wants to be that 9-year-old and has, I always joke with them, they're like bugs, right? Their antennas are always up. They don't look like they're listening, but they're listening to everything. And so you have these conversations or even just these bits of discussion and they're hearing.
Yeah.
And they want to be part of the conversation too. And so all of this is to say, I had never done this before. It's my first time being a dad. So
I've been feeling the same way, JM, like 100%. Every conversation I've been having recently with people is about the future and what is the future going to hold for my, 8, 9-year-old, 7-year-old, all that kind of stuff. So why don't we talk about vision for a little bit and talk about like, what do we think, you know, and the way I kind of phrase this here is like how each of us think about the future and how MeTotal can kind of help the future. But kind of given the state of where the world is today, like what do we want to see out of the future and how this world can evolve? Like what are the things that are really important to us individual? Because I think that might be able to help frame the lens in which each of us apply MeTotal
yeah.
and the podcast moving forward.
So I'll start by kind of finishing what I was talking about. So the thing that I keep coming back to, and fentanyl will continue to be a theme in all of these conversations. But what I want to make sure is that my kids always feel comfortable to talk to me about anything, right? Because the reality is, and as I even think about our childhood, the people who went the most aggressive were the ones that had a lot of times the most strict parents too. They were kind of going against the grain in regards to what they had been told or hammered on for however long. And the people that I feel like even to this day have the best relationship with alcohol in particular are people that were comfortable to talk to their parents about, or maybe even able to consume a little bit with their parents at a younger age. And so that sort of thinking of being open to the dialogue with my kids all is an important thing, which is why we talk about all these topics too. With regards to MeTotal, the whole thing for me personally is if everybody could just find some amount of empathy for somebody else, or some amount of ability to at least understand another person's perspective versus drawing their line in the sand and staying put in whatever bunker they're in, particular to their own thinking and their own convictions, then the world would be a better place. And you can apply that everywhere. You can apply that in the world conflicts that are happening all over the place. You can apply that to American politics in regards to the parties and these different jokers that are lining up to run for president again, and all the bullshit that they talk about, and all the specific like spatting that they have specific to all this stuff that is attacking and not at all about unifying the country. You can talk about it in regards to the ways that we're teaching our kids in school, specific to whether things happened in history or not, on and on and on. And the reality is, if we can find that middle place, or just that ability to show some level of empathy and some level of understanding, that's going to go a long way. And so while we can't impact the global conflicts, and while we, I'm not running for president, I don't know about either of you guys, but whether we're going to get involved, if we can make a small impact with those around us and start to help people to see some level of compassion, or have some level of understanding that creates some level of empathy, particular to somebody else's circumstance that might not be their own and might not necessarily even be what they believe in, then maybe that person will share with somebody else, and we can at least make an impact across some small fraction of the people, which would be a big win from my side. Because the reality is, the world is heading in a really bad direction right now. I think the more that we can try to impact those around us, the better.
Kary, what do you say?
Yeah, JM, I can definitely resonate with your perspective. I'm going to kind of take this down a little bit of a rabbit hole and sort of respond in an indirect way. But it's interesting, because when I think about the future, I almost think about it like someone who is 80 years old today. Like, their vision of the future, like when they were my age, probably looked nothing like the future looks today. I mean, I remember growing up, like Back to the Future and the Jetsons, like some of that stuff is on point, but a lot of it's very far away. But I know just recently Apple released this Vision Pro, and it's the first iteration of it. So there's a lot of trial and error, and everyone has an opinion. But there's a part of me that I'm actually somewhat optimistic for the future. And hear me out on this. I am, I do tend to be kind of a half full kind of guy, but I just feel like, again, I mean, there's so many different energies sort of moving in the world right now. And I just feel like us as human beings, although there is still a lot of just really dark things happening, I do feel like as a species, like as a entity, like humanity is evolving, like on a lot of levels, although it doesn't seem that way sometimes. And I think for me, it's kind of like this crossroad that I see. Like, I feel like it could literally go in either direction. It's like we have the technology and tools now to literally pretty much get rid of everything that we have a challenge with right now. Like, we have the technology and the tools and the brain to do it. But I think what's lacking is the emotional intelligence. There's still people trying to force things to happen, or trying to impede and impose their way on someone else who thinks differently, instead of creating space for a dialogue to happen so that growth and change can actually occur. So I think for me, I'm optimistic, because I feel like part of developing emotional intelligence is healing. Like, once you start to heal, you can feel more. And as a result, you just become more empathetic to people around you, even if they're different. And I just feel like the reason I mentioned the Apple Vision Pro is because, we're all in the tech space, at least not too far from it. And I mean, I've just seen some different like augmented reality tools that really give us an opportunity to like immerse ourselves in these environments that give us a chance to start developing our emotional intelligence sort of in the comfort of our home. For example, back in 2020, George Floyd, there was a lot going on, but people were becoming much more aware of this term microaggressions, which can happen to all people. It's not just one race that experiences it. But now with these augmented realities, you can essentially like simulate a situation where you actually get to experience what a microaggression is. Like, someone's not telling you that, like, you're actually experiencing it to where you can feel it. And now you're like, oh, that's what that is. I didn't even realize that was that was something. But I just think, again, like, as we start to heal, as we start to become emotionally intelligent, more emotionally intelligent, I just feel like human beings will start to go about the way we do things maybe just a little bit different, maybe with a little bit more compassion, because I think at the end of the day, like, I just don't think you can fight fire with fire. We've tried that and it just doesn't really work that well.
Yeah. So I kind of split the difference between the two of you in terms of my perspective on if the world's good or bad. So for the listeners out there, if you have time to Google a guy named Steven Pinkerton, you should do it. He had a TED Talk about 5 years ago, maybe it was a little bit less, maybe like 3 years ago, something like that. We were still kind of, in a similar kind of communications rut to what we're in right now. But his basic premises, we're all just being gaslit by everybody, all the politicians and all the media around us. And the way you can kind of tell what's going on is just look at the statistics from your parents' generation to now. The world's never been better than it is right now. Like, we've never had fewer wars. We've never, like, wars have been happening since human history all over the planet, and it's actually getting better, not worse, when it comes to that stuff. If you look at it statistically, generation over generation, similar, and it's across the board. You could look at the 80s and see how much more deadly that decade was than it is right now. We all think fondly of the past because we're looking through rose-colored glasses on those things that happened to us in the past, especially if you made it through the generation to where you're at now. So, so all that to say, I think both of you are right. I think the world is in a dangerous place. The world's also never been better, right? But the reason why we're in this kind of juxtaposition is because the people that are communicating to us and the people we choose to trust and believe and let into our brains when it comes to the news and social media and all that kind of stuff. Uh, so that's one big thing for me, is figuring out how to better navigate that stuff, how to really evaluate the stimulus that's coming into our everyday lives, and not just for me but for my kids as well, right? Like, really being able to navigate mobile phones and social media and the news and really figure out what people are telling us and how to see through the bullshit and find out what the truth is a big thing for me moving forward. And similar to outside of technology, I think, JM, to kind of piggyback on what you were saying with like the epidemic with fentanyl, it's not just fentanyl. It's there's a much bigger thing at play, to me, at least in my opinion. And it starts with the stuff that's already legal. So, like, I'm very skeptical of big medicine and big pharma. And right now, a lot of the precursors to what's happening with a lot of our overdoses and drug problems and the epidemic of addiction in this country starts with our over prescription of the population. And what we're doing this with synthetic drugs when more natural compounds exist right in front of us, and we turn our nose up at it all the time. So I think those are two things that are really big for me: the world of technology and communication, but also how we view medicine in general. And then I think lastly, to kind of figure out what I would see in terms of vision, in terms of how we can combat two of these things. I think, and this is where I think MeTotal can be inserted as a wedge issue into them, is we as the society, as we the people, we need to exercise more control or take more agency over our situation and not just trust that the macro forces at play are telling us the truth all the time. And so the more I think we can kind of like convince people to like do their research, do your homework, understand what you're putting in your body, understand how you think about things, understand how you're interacting with the world, the better we'll be. And so part of my MeTotal journey is also figuring out how to coach my kids into their MeTotal journey, and how to pass this thought process and behavior model along.
Yeah, and Joe, I'm just curious. I mean, I know as a kid, my mom used to say, "Put your dishes in the dishwasher," or wash your dish after you eat, and she never did it. You know what I mean? So I think as adults and as just people who are raising this next generation, I think we have to be that thing. We can't just keep telling.
Oh yeah. I mean, and I think this dovetails nicely into the topic we're going to get into next. I won't necessarily crack the top on it yet, but um, I have this conversation at least once a week with people in my day job of, like, I saw a statistic out there somewhere where I think it's either 1 in 4 or 1 in 6 members of the Gen Z demographic is on some prescription of antidepressants. And that scares the ever living crap out of me because my kids are only probably, 10 years, 15 years away from where Gen Z's at right now. And when I think about it, and I ask myself the question, would I rather my kids be prescribed antidepressants, or would I rather them be able to use something like cannabis to cure their problems, and not even cure? I'm not even, and nothing against people that are on antidepressants. I know they're really good for a certain amount of people out there, but for me, when I think about my kids and what I want them exposed to and what I don't want them exposed to, I'd feel much more comfortable with cannabis, even though I'm not that big of a cannabis user myself. You know,
Yeah.
So, the world's the best it's ever been. Maybe.
Neither of us can prove it. So.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm not going to disagree with you. There's a lot of things I would say in response specific to just the advances in technology, particularly on the conflict side, that make it a much scarier world than it was all those other times ago. And I think pharma is a big reason why this is. You don't get the coverage of how many people are losing their life to a variety of different things on a daily basis. And so that epidemic is as large as any drug epidemic I think that we've ever had. And you're right, it all spawned from Purdue Pharma, basically, right? Like, it started with pain pills and just getting just droves of the population completely fucking addicted to this drug that then all of a sudden was gone. And so they just continued to look for ways to chase the lightning or to find that high. And going back to the conflict thing, like I'd also say, you can't tell me it's not true that China is ensuring that fentanyl finds its way into this country as a way to attack the US. So there's like a million things that I would go on that. But all that being said, I do think the reality is there's a ton of gas lamping going on, and you have to find the source of your information, and you have to find the right data, and you have to realize that there are, to your point, natural paths to some ability of wellness or some ability of cure to the various things that we battle. But at the end of the day, I keep coming back to this whole life is a big relationship, and trying to cultivate the strength of the relationships that each of us have with all those around us the best that we can, and show up in the best version of ourselves is the best way to start, not only for the relationships I have with you guys, but to your point, being the right model for our kids, to hope that they value those things going forward as well, more than most of the population at this point.
It's such a weird juxtaposition because I've seen stats like 30,000. I don't know exactly where I found it, but like 30,000 or 300,000 people a day, one of those, escape poverty worldwide every single day. And like, on one hand, that's amazing. That I can't even imagine. I can't even speak volumes of how amazing that is. But on the other hand, we've never had more deaths from unnatural and unusual causes, right? So like, part of me wants to think, okay, wow, like that, some of these vaccines and therapies are really great. Like, we're able to go into third world countries and we're saving people like by the hour. But then, to your point, like, if we don't shore up other aspects of what's going on out there civilly and societally, then crazy things that shouldn't be happening are happening. Like the internet is awesome, social media is awesome, but it's also brainwashing people into going in and shooting up schools. So like, I have no idea what to think.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think social media plays a part, but I think also too, parents play a huge part. I mean, I just still haven't heard a story about a kid who is involved in a shooting whose parents were truly involved. Like, I just haven't heard it.
Yeah.
I haven't heard it.
And that's, you asked what can we do, like that is what we can do, right? Like, I think there's MeTotal as it pertains to like us and taking like control over our own life, but there's also MeTotal as it applies us outward, right? So like, what can you do in your immediate family, your extended family, your community, and apply some MeTotal principles in a very easy and simple way.
Yeah, 100%.